What's up, Charles?
Hey, what's up, man?
Groovy, bro. I'm doing groovy. Changed up the intro. Get a little mellow. Uh oh,
Yeah, 10-4, 10-4.
my thing is frozen on the phone. I don't know why.
No, it looks,
Yours is going good.
yep, yep. Mine is going exceptionally well.
How was your day, bro?
Well, like anything else, it's just one of those days.
Yeah, it just doesn't get any better as we move forward as it relates to COVID. Um, but we got a great show tonight. Charlie. Thanks for last night for being the yang to my ying or the yin to my yang, whatever you want to call it.
No problem.
Um,
No problem.
we got a great show for all of you tonight. I know we're expecting a huge crowd tonight. So
Hey,
this is where we come. And my plan is tonight is once this, and that's why I got to really watch myself because what I'm gonna do after tonight's video is I'm gonna send it to the media and hopefully they can use it to inform and educate the general public because
Mhm.
they're not getting the word. They're not getting the word. Well, they're getting the word, but it's not the accurate word. So um, I,
You
I
know,
I I expect a really really informative show tonight. I think from what happened yesterday and then today's numbers, which is falling right into where some of our guests have predicted we would be. So I think it'll be a great show tonight.
I got to drop this off. This is from one of our viewers, Marlies, Big Island Candies. Yeah, I believe it was a
Nice.
daughter that stopped by and dropped it off. I guess they came to a party that was or a drop off, not a party, a drop off right down the road from my end. Didn't want to say thank you very, very much. I'll tell you one thing. It's someone had asked me today at work, "Oh, Uncle Charlie, you just stay mellow." And this is this is my take on it, and this is just me. It's not a reflection on anybody. I learned a long time ago that even as a policeman, you do all you can do. You leave it up to the judge to adjudicate, right? That's it.
Hmm.
Prosecutors. Sometimes it goes in favor of your investigation. Sometimes it goes opposite because maybe one tad bit of the investigation is missing, and that makes all the
Hmm.
difference. So what we have here in Hawaii is we get frustrated because we're anxious. We want things to happen, and I told the people I'm talking to today that until if I ever sat in that office at the state capitol, if I sat in office, then you'd see difference. Then you would see a difference. But I am not there. So what's the next best thing? 2022 is right around the corner, folks. And if you feel you've been slighted in any way, and many out there feels that, you gotta be the ones to actually make the change happen. It won't happen on its own. Yeah, plain and simple. And I don't want people to get so frustrated that they catch one stroke, they burst some bubble at the top, just from getting tense. And I in no way, and I respect all points of view out there, but I am no way downplaying this thing. But it's just that I know how I get if I ramp it up, and nobody will stop me once I go on that tangent. And I don't want to go there. But I elect to just take this road and says, okay, let this thing play out because that's the best I can do. And with that said, the best I can do is just give my little safety tips from here and there, and hopefully it rubs off. But I will say one thing today. We had an experience. Person came in, unfortunately, was positive. But I would think the Department of Health would have their hands in this more so because of Omicron. So calls were placed to Department of Health. Zero response. And everybody looks towards us, of course, security, right? Thinking that we have the power to take care of things right then and there. But we don't. Unless someone at the top gives us a power that, should a infected person come in, you will have the power to do this, or you will have the power to do that. One, two, where do you put them? Okay. So there's just so many bugs that needs to be worked on in this. And I guess the frustrating part for me, Mel, is we went through this the last surge, right? We went through this the last surge. There's a lot of finger pointing going on, and I thought all of that would be taken care of already. But man, it's still happening, and it's frustrating. It's really
Yeah,
frustrating.
it is. It just validates what we've been saying for so long is that we're not prepared. And
Hmm.
you say someone came in positive. I'm assuming you're saying someone came into Lihui Airport positive
Yes.
off
Yeah.
of an aircraft,
Yes.
right? And you would think, right, that we would have a quarantine facility waiting for them, uh,
Hmm.
and it's not a choice. It's that's where you'll go. But
Yeah.
this is one. I mean, you saw the numbers from the testing at Hawaiian Air today. 175 employees tested positive today. Um, we this is what frustrates me, Charlie, and I get what you're saying about in the police department we did our job. We were able to do things directly. I mean, if you got to a fight, you arrest somebody. If you got to
Hmm.
someone that was abusing someone else, you made an arrest. If you went to a disturbance, you broke it up. Um, you had that ability and authority to
To
actually
do
take
something.
action. To
To
actually
do
take
something.
action.
Yeah.
And then from that point, you're right. It goes to a courthouse. You have a judge. It gets adjudicated. And all the evidence is on the table. And yes, Charlie, and you and I have both been there, walking out of a trial that you thought you should have won, that you didn't.
Hmm.
But then you move on. You see, in with COVID, for me, it's difficult because number one, we're helpless. We are doing what we can, but we don't have that direct ability or authority to implement pre and post testing, pre and post travel testing. We don't have the authority or the ability to limit sizes in concerts and so forth. And the other part, we don't have a judge that's going to take a look at the evidence that we have put forth through our experts. What we'll see tonight, we don't. And all of the evidence is on the table. Nothing is missing, and the decisions that are being made is not what you would expect in a court of law. So for that, I'm frustrated. But I will tell you this: um, I had a good discussion with one of my mentors, my sensei, Yoda himself, Mayor Harry Kim, this morning. I really needed some therapy. I needed to talk to somebody that see the thing you guys don't see. You don't see Charlie pre and post show. I mean, he's a little more animated off camera. And I spoke to Charlie this morning. In fact, we had a pretty damn good discussion this morning. Oh, and by the way, this is being aired right now live in our clubhouse. For those of you that don't know, watch the comments. You see a link to get in to join us in the clubhouse. It's being simulcast there. It's audio only. And right after the show, we jump on and we do a post-show talk. And I encourage our doctors, our guests tonight, to jump on. But anyway, and Mayor Harry Kim is as frustrated as us. And but he said now is the time where we need to exude this calm and let everybody know we got to do our best that we can to get the word to the decision makers. And I think there's some truth to that. However, sometimes I think it's the Portuguese blood. The passion overtakes the brain and the mouth. But I am not happy with what I'm hearing. And there's a lot of things we'll talk about tonight when our experts come on. Um, we're going to really let them speak. I did tell them expect to be on for 90 minutes, so we don't cut anybody short. I want to give each of them ample time to share their perspective and their findings and their insights. And but we got a panel tonight like no other. We have four of the top experts in the state, guys. These people are so willing to come on and educate and inform. So we're blessed tonight, and I would ask each and every one of you. Now we got 115 people on. I'm hoping to get over 300 tonight. But right now, hit the share button. I don't care what platform you're on. Go ahead and hit the share button and get everybody on this on this show tonight. I think
Yep.
what you'll hear tonight, one of the things that's remarkable about our guests is every single one of our guests, every individually, have predicted what we're seeing today. Um, and we're going to hear about that tonight. But it's not about whose one is bigger, right? It's not about, oh, you know, I said this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a year ago, whatever. No, it's not about that. It's this constant reminders that these experts have been putting out to our leadership that have gone ignored. And now I watched the news tonight. I saw Lieutenant Governor Josh Green talking about modifying safe travels in the beginning of the year. This is what really upsets me when he says we need to stop the spread of travel related cases. uh,
I
I
thought
don't
there
know.
I thought there was denial before.
It was it wasn't even it was I mean it was completely not travel related. We knew because Kawhi was the only ones reporting factual data. So we knew, Charlie. We knew from the beginning the majority of the cases that we saw on Kauai, and we're no different than any other place. But majority of our cases on Kauai was travel related when we did not have the restrictions. So hearing him tonight makes me nauseous. But what even and I'm going to ask our experts tonight. He's going to propose or what he's proposing is nothing really different, boosted or tested. Now it's just vaccinated, 2 vaccinations. He's going to add in boosted. Still doesn't do much for the program. You're still going to see a ton of infected, boosted people. They won't be sick. They may not have symptoms, but they are infected. So, yeah. So it's kind of ironic. And for me, it's like vindication, I guess, Charlie, for what we have and our guests have been saying for so long. Tonight, you'll meet people that was actually on the task force that put together safe travels, and you'll hear about our experts talk about how the safe travels program, as it was adopted and implemented, fell short and did not go with the recommendations that
Well,
the experts had.
let me say this much: if there are people out there that still have a hard time understanding what is taking place, I'll use this real simple analogy. When you go in for a checkup, you've been healthy all those years, and then all of a sudden you're given the word you have cancer. You know that feeling is very devastating, right? Very
Yeah.
devastating. I mean, I felt that with my second wife who died of cancer. You know, and did she want it? No, but it was tough. You raise three boys and you push on. But the fact remains, there was no outward signs or symptoms. So it's like with this virus, you may not have no signs or symptoms, but the caution to it all, folks, is what if it does take a turn for the worse? What if it does? You're fully boosted and you hear breakthrough cases. What if the individual, their respiratory system is compromised? There are so many factors. What do you do then? And I hate to keep on bringing this up, but my brother was that's what happened. His his respiratory system got compromised in the very very early on stages, but he still kept his faith that everything was going to work out, but it didn't. And that's the part that when we talk about this virus, safety wise, we don't even want you to get to that point. See, unlike cancers, it's still unknown how you get it. Maybe there's environmental conditions, right? But we know with Omicron, if you're far from it, you won't get it. It will just not pop up in your system. But those who are banking on the fact that, hey, I've been vaccinated, I have nothing to worry about, and they go right up to that line. It's like going up to the cage at the zoo and really not observing that the cage is open on one side. and going in there and taunting the lion, right? The lion just comes out and just eats you alive. And that's what I'm saying. Why put yourself in a position to go right up to the cage? I don't understand that. And that's the difficult part. I have trying to trying to say, well, okay, there's a reason, there's a rhyme or reason to everything, but no, if you have the ability to stay away from danger, then why go and flirt with it in the first place?
All right. Well, the doorbells are ringing. We have people in our green room. Uh, Technology is on our side tonight, unlike last night. So we're going to go ahead and start bringing them in. Boom, boom, and boom. What a panel! Charlie, I don't think we've ever had a panel like this in the history of the Mel and Charlie show. I'm kind of almost intimidated by the intelligence on the other side of the screen.
Hmm.
There you go.
Well, you know,
Up here.
it's it's uh it's flattering that we got three top individuals here that specialize, have that talked about this before, and it's it'll be a good evening.
It's gonna be a great evening. So we're gonna get started. Capono should be on. I saw him pop up on the comments. So I'm gonna do a quick introduction. We have never really done that, but again, I want our viewers to understand that we have some awesome guests tonight, and I'm gonna introduce each one. Dr. Tim Brown, senior fellow in the research program at the East West Center, where he directs a small team of epidemiologists and programmers in developing and applying goals for HIV modeling and analysis. I pulled this off of Google University, where many of the medical degrees are being issued right now, Doc. So I know a lot of your work now is with COVID, but I wanted to give the people an idea. He works closely with UNAIDS, the Global Fund, Avenir Health, and national partners throughout Asia to improve national responses to epidemics and ensure available resources are invested to produce the greatest benefits. He's a member of the UNAIDS reference group of estimates, modeling, and projection, an advisor to UNAIDS and the Global Fund on HIV modeling and evaluation issues, an advisor to the Scientific Committee on AIDS and STD in Hong Kong. Before joining the center, he was formerly assistant professor in electrical engineering, University of Hawaii, assistant professor in the program on computing, Department of Mathematics, University of California at LA, and applications groups manager, Amatech Computer Research Division in Pasadena. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Glad to be
Dr.
here.
Lee Altenberg is faculty in mathematics and information and computer sciences at the UH Manoa. He's a theoretical population geneticist. He lived in Maui for 19 years and applied his expertise to enact legislation to protect native Wili Wili forests in Wailea from development and to protect Maui's night skies from light pollution. For his work, he was awarded the Onipa'a Award by Sierra Club during the pandemic. He has served as a member of the Hawaii Pandemic Applied Modeling Work Group, also known as HIPAM, and the Models of Infectious Disease Agent Study. Welcome to the show. And Dr. Dara O'Carroll is an emergency physician, CNN medical analyst, and medical consultant to the Netflix show Pandemic: How to Prevent an Outbreak. He was a consultant to Netflix before COVID was even thought of. They worked on the show Pandemic. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. He was a consultant there. And then, of course, our Kauai Dr. Kapono Chong-Hanssen serves as the medical director for Ho'ola Lahui, Hawaii Kauai Community Health Center, which is both the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Systems Office for Kauai and the only federally qualified community health center on the island. He is a recipient of the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship and attended the University of Southern California Keck School of Medicine prior to family medicine residency at the University of Hawaii. He is also a board member of Ahahui Ona Oka, the Association of Native Hawaiian Physicians, serving as the chair of the advocacy committee. He played an active role in advocating for safer travel policies throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as outreach to unsheltered and hardest hit Pacific Islander communities on the island of Kauai to provide masks, hygiene supplies, testings, vax clinics, monoclonal antibody treatment. He collaborated with a group of Kumuhula to implement the Lahui Kanaka Kapu in efforts to quell the surge of cases in Hawaii experienced around August of 2020. The Hawaii Public Health Institute honored him as a public health hero in April of 2021 for his work during the pandemic. I don't know what happened to his video, but anyway, that is Dr. Kapono Chong-Hanssen. Whew! I wanted to properly introduce you folks, really for the benefit. Charlie and I know all of you well, virtually, but wanted to give a little foundation for our viewers that may not know you folks. They've seen you all on TV at one point or another, and we just want to get into the discussion. And I thought about how we're going to do this. How we're going to? It's like having 6 starters on the football or 4 starters on the team. Who do you start? I'm just going to do it the way I thought it out. I want to start with Dr. Tim Brown.
Hey,
Because
just remember, Mel, I'm sorry. You got all the starters. I'm just the water boy, so you guys let me know what you guys want, okay?
You and me. You see, I said 4 starters. So Charlie, you and I are the backup, man. But I want to start with Dr. Tim Brown for one reason. Is Dr. Tim Brown, as all of our guests have, but Dr. Tim Brown has been on TV. He has been somewhat projecting where we're at today. He has been quite vocal. I really love the way he presents. So we're going to start off with you, Doc. I had a structured program for tonight until yesterday. And even more so today with the numbers which we all expected. Everyone on this call tonight expected it. But Dr. Tim Brown, if you don't mind, can you kind of give us, you're the kicker. You're going to kick off and we'll take it from there. I just kind of want to get an overview of what you're seeing right now and what's on the horizon.
Well, I think, fundamentally, like you say, everybody knows the situation. We're in an extremely rapid rise of the Omicron variant across all islands at this point. A week ago, I probably couldn't have said that, but now definitely, Kauai, the Big Island, Maui are seeing almost exactly the same thing that Oahu is seeing. So Omicron has clearly made entry and basically is spreading extremely rapidly. We know that it's about twice as infectious, 2 to 3 times as infectious, I should say, as Delta is. And that is a combination of probably some increased transmissibility, that is, it's easier to transmit, but it's also a factor of immune escape, that it basically can avoid our vaccines. We know that the vaccines, for example, and the studies have been done in the United Kingdom, the double dose Pfizer basically drops to about 35% effectiveness against infection. After 6 months, it actually drops closer to 20%. If you're boosted, your vaccine protection is then 70 to 75% against infection. Now, the only good news in that picture is that the T cell immunity against severe illness and death seems to be holding up fairly well. So that people who have been vaxxed are basically seeing comparatively mild illness, nothing as serious as what we saw basically with the unvaccinated people. So I think that, that's the one positive thing the vaccination is doing what it's supposed to doing. Previous infection, for example, with the Delta variant also confers some of that same protection against severe illness, but it gives you virtually very limited protection against infection. So what's happening is this virus is spreading very quickly. It can spread among people who are vaccinated as well as among those who are unvaccinated. And the result we all see basically on a daily basis, 3,464 cases today. And so I think, everyone's pretty much aware of that situation. So I think that, that's the reality of where we are right now. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? And I'll throw it back to you, Mel. We lose Mel.
Mel, are you muted?
Yeah, I'm asking you guys to mute yourself if you're not speaking, and I myself was muted. But Dr. Altenberg, you have been on our show, obviously, as has all of our guests. But you are part of an organization that does modeling. You work with Dr. Chiba, and I remember Dr. Chiba saying, I read her quote in an article that math and science doesn't have a political agenda. You have actually tracked the modeling, your projections, or you call it something different. It's not a prediction. It's not a whatever it is. You're pretty right on target. You're pretty right on target. What are you? are you seeing now? Is the math and the science and the modeling seems to be pretty accurate?
Well, so the things I've been looking at with only access to the case numbers. By the way, can you hear me okay? Am I coming through loud and clear?
Loud and clear, sir.
Okay, so I've been looking at the exponential growth rate of the case numbers. And what we saw was at the beginning of this surge, the numbers were doubling every 3 days. And, that's just monstrous in terms of a growth rate. For comparison, during the height of the most explosive phase of the Delta surge in the summer, the doubling time was 9 days. That was at its fastest. And then after a few weeks of that, it slowed down to 30 days. And that was when the hospitalization numbers were creeping up into the 400s. And there was nothing being done, no restrictions being used to try to stop the growth. But then they started coming down. So here, suddenly, so there's been almost a month of flat numbers in the case numbers, and then suddenly this explosive growth beginning earlier in December with a 3-day doubling time, and only on Oahu. So that signifies to me that the people on Oahu are not suddenly misbehaving so much worse than the neighbor islands. That indicated to me that was Omicron. That Omicron got established here very quickly. In fact, early in the first cases of Omicron being identified in the United States, they had identified 43 cases total, and 9 of those were in Honolulu, in Oahu. So Omicron seems to have gotten established here very early and in large numbers, and only on Oahu. The fact that it wasn't going up on the other islands it is symptomatic of the fact that it got here first and it hadn't spread yet. But subsequently, it's growing at about a 3.5-day doubling time on the Big Island and about the same on Maui this week. Though Oahu has slowed down to about a 7-day doubling time. So these are unprecedented. So the only time that the case numbers doubled at a rate of three days was back in March of 2020 when the SARS-CoV-2 first got here. And so we haven't seen a growth rate since then. So that indicates to me something is really different. And it's not due to holiday gatherings, because when you look at 2020, we didn't see this spike happen in 2020, same holiday gatherings. And it can't be simply due to Delta, because Delta has already been here. And so I would attribute this spike to Omicron. So that's a brief look at the numbers. And what's terrific is that the doubling time seems to have slowed down on Oahu, and that could be either because the case numbers really have slowed down, or we simply run out of tests and are not getting tested enough to measure it, or well, those are the two main reasons. But the hospitalization rates are also doubling in about 9 days if you do an exponential fit, 14 cases per day. So what will happen in the future, we don't know, because we don't have any detailed resolution of what's going on with the cases. We just have the numbers that are posted by HIEMA and the Department of Health. But that's a little bit of overview of the growth rates in comparison to the previous points in the pandemic.
Thanks, Doc. We get to our Dr. O'Carroll and Dr. Capono. I'm trying to get a perspective from the doctors that are working with patients or emergency rooms or whatever. What are you guys seeing as it relates? I do want to, I know someone just posted the restrictions were lifted on December 1st. Our hospitalizations, as I just checked before the show, on December 1st, we had 41 COVID hospitalizations. Today, we have 141. It's a 340+% increase since December 1st, which is when the restrictions were lifted. Are you seeing that case counts rise? Do you think has any correlation to the lifting of restrictions? Oh, hang on. Let me unmute you, sir. Okay.
Cool. Hey, thanks for having me, and honored to be here with everyone. Yeah, it definitely has a component, the lifting of restrictions to fuel the spread, right? Where you kind of have every single log in the fire, if you think of the opportunity of this virus as a fire that needs oxygen and logs to grow. And so we've got, no restrictions whatsoever. And I think policy usually has to have a good balance, right? You've got public health on one side and economic health on the other, but I don't think they always have to be completely dichotomous. I think they can share the same values. But really, we're on Oahu, at least, we're really just taking one side. And it's a little disheartening for me, and I think all of the medical workers, that this far into the pandemic, we still seem to be stepping on the same landmines, which is frustrating. On a bigger picture, and some perhaps good news, is we do have a couple of things around the corner for treatment-wise, like Paxlovid, although it's coming out in very small doses, but we are getting some. And also there's been some great work on a pan-coronavirus vaccine that maybe can't expect it in 2022, but we can hope. So those are some potential good news. But what is also frustrating is the what everybody harps on is like, oh, this is mild. But yeah, if it was mild and it spread like flu, it on average transferred to 1 to 1.3 other people, then you could take it as such. But this is, as was said at the top of the show by Dr. Brown, 2 to 3 times as transmissible as Delta. So that's something to really, really take into context. And the last point I'll make is that this is so new, this variant, right? Like, it was probably originated sometime in October, was really discovered and had a large outbreak in Johannesburg and Gauteng area in South Africa in November. And so we're about a month out. And so we're all trying to piece together, like, what does this mean for the rest of the population of the world, right? And so South Africa has a very different medical system. It actually has 2 very different medical systems. It's got a private and a public sector. I worked in Johannesburg for about a month teaching trauma residents there, and it was very, very night and day regarding testing, comorbidities. And so the data has to be, I guess, I would take as not reflective of maybe as would be affected here in the United States. Also, they have a younger population, so you've got to take that into context as well. So we're really just kind of chasing, making decisions off of very limited information and banking, or I would say gambling, that this is going to not affect our healthcare system in the way that prior waves had. And while there are some signs that it's, that it maybe has a quarter to 50% amount of the hospitalizations, but infects 2 to 3 to 4 times as many people in a total wave, like that automatically cancels it out. So I guess if I could leave the viewers with anything, is that I don't think making decisions on public health that ignore public health when you don't have all the information is a wise thing to do. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Chong-Hanssen, one of the things Dr. O'Carroll just mentioned, which something I wanted to bring up. Right after this, we'll put you back all on the screen and we'll go through some old-fashioned discussion. But we say that the severity of Omicron may be less than Delta, 50% or even 25%, whatever it may be. But as the cases climb 3 and 4 times as fast, the net gain of infections and hospitalizations will still increase. What are you seeing on the front line, Doc? You're out there at the community clinic. You're treating patients every day. What are you seeing as far as the infections and the levels of infections here on Kauai?
Well, I'm seeing just a big skyrocketing number of cases. We're diagnosing a lot more every day than we were in the past. I don't think we've really seen the increase in hospitalizations on Kauai yet, but we're starting to see it on Oahu. And I think that's really, we're kind of crossing our fingers on that. So with these huge numbers of cases, but possibly less virulent virus, or one that causes less severe disease, will we see the, hospitalization numbers get close to overloading the system like we did with Delta? I guess the story's yet to be told about that, and we'll see what happens. But the framework has sort of been laid, with cases already increasing and at higher levels than the peak of Delta. The really difficult thing for us has been, I'm not sure if your viewers are aware, but Regeneron, the monoclonal antibody that was a real game changer, came to Delta and was really something that our clinic was using a lot to try to prevent hospitalizations, doesn't look like it's effective against Omicron. So over the past few weeks, we've been deciding, all right, so at what point do we stop using Regeneron because it's looking like Omicron is becoming the dominant variant in Hawaii? And from the data I've heard through colleagues, it's looking like Oahu is something around 80% already, maybe higher, and the neighbor islands are probably following that. So most places are stopping offering Regeneron monoclonal antibody treatment, and we're waiting for the next option. So as far as the next monoclonal antibody, I believe it's pronounced sotrovimab, that will probably replace Regeneron, but Kauai's looking at getting like 6 doses next week. So, I mean, it's very limited. Our community health center ordered Paxlovid, which is the oral treatment, antiviral treatment that looks to be the most effective. And then there's the other one, and I'm probably butchering these names. I'm not sure how to say it, but I think that's molnupiravir. But Paxlovid, for example, we ordered 20 doses. So that's what we're expecting to get next week for the island. With hundreds of cases a day, it's not like we're going to be able to treat everybody with that. So, that's been a challenge to keep on top of the data. Then, of course, the CDC changes in quarantine, and we have all these questions from our patients about how long they have to quarantine, when they can go back to work, and it's just become pretty confusing. I think, you guys made the point about the CDC. Do you trust the CDC? And I trust the CDC to have some evidence-based, evidence to base their decisions on. But sometimes I question the timing of when they make these decisions to release the information that they do. And especially when it comes to Hawaii. So, Hawaii, we're just starting this Omicron surge, and now we're having these changes happen before healthcare systems have really been able to implement the systems to deliver the medications that could blunt the effect of the Omicron surge on hospitalizations. It really makes me wonder why the CDC thought this was a wise thing to do leading up to New Year's Eve with what's going on nationwide. But I understand that when the CDC makes that recommendation, I'm not surprised that the state of Hawaii feels a lot of pressure to follow that, or same or almost the same, similar recommendations. But yeah, I sort of felt like this was probably going to happen, but maybe after the Omicron surge looked like it was starting to come down. And to me, there's too many things up in the air right now. I'm really trying to put a lot of effort into figuring out the pathways to deliver those preventive treatments to the people who need it in the time frame that they need it. So, for example, Paxlovid is most effective within 5 days of symptom onset. But with shortages in testing supplies and difficulty with access to testing, getting a test result within 5 days of symptom onset is a challenge. And then getting the medicine within that time frame is also going to be a challenge. So that's what I'm trying to work out right now over the past week, on top of all the questions I'm getting from the community about what is the deal with quarantine now. And isolation.
Doc, before we start the real dialogue, you said you ordered 20 doses of that monoclonal. Is there an allotment, or are we limited to what we can order?
So that's an oral antiviral treatment. So kind of like Tamiflu for flu. That's a little different than the monoclonal antibody. My understanding is that for at least early January, we're looking at statewide. There's probably about 120 doses of sotrovimab for the monoclonal antibody that is effective against COVID. 6 of those are being sent to Wilcox, as far as I understand it. For Paxlovid, and my understanding is that is the much more effective antiviral medication in comparison to molnupiravir, and that one is about 240 doses statewide, with 20 of them coming to Kauai. So I mean, it's pretty small numbers in the face of the huge number of cases that we're going to be diagnosing during that time period.
Got it. All right. Okay. Yesterday was a pretty frustrating day for a lot of people. Two things happened yesterday. I mean, two things of significance. Number one was Mayor Blangiardi's announcement that he was not going to lift any restrictions, that he felt personal responsibility should lead us through Omicron, through the holidays, through the New Year's, that he wasn't going to interfere with the businesses. And then the second thing, which was shortly after that, was the governor's announcement that we were going to follow the CDC recommendations to reduce quarantine to 5 days if you test positive. Again, let's go back to Dr. Brown. Your thoughts on let's start with those two significant issues or events that occurred yesterday, and you can just combine them and generalize if you want.
Well, I think what I want to start with is, I think on Oahu we've been behind the curve almost from the start of this thing. The lifting restrictions on December 1st was happening with the knowledge that Omicron was coming if you were looking. I actually talked to the Star Advertiser on December 3rd, I think, and talked about the fact that this was coming, that in fact lifting the restrictions on December 1st was a mistake at this point in time, that at the very least we should have waited until after the holidays. And I think what we've seen since then has just been a complete failure on the part of our public officials to take their responsibility seriously in terms of protecting the people of Hawaii. I think we've seen our public officials sitting on the sideline not doing anything. I think they have a responsibility to pull the circuit breaker on this rapid growth that we're seeing right now, which they have not done. I mean, they have not shut down large gatherings, despite the fact that we have seen repeated outbreaks in large groups of people. They haven't closed the nightclubs and bars, again, despite cluster outbreaks in those places. We've kept the restaurants open at full capacity, assuming that safe access on Oahu would basically keep us safe, yet we know at this point that our vaccines are only about 35% effective against infection with Omicron. And so restaurants where people are taking off their mask, and they do pretty much take the mask off as soon as they walk in the door, and they don't put it on again even after they leave. And I think that has been a huge mistake. That has basically given Omicron an incredible breeding ground with virtually nothing standing in its way. And even at this stage where, like you say, yesterday we saw 1,500 cases, today we see 3,500 almost. And again, where are our public officials? They're basically silent. Except Mayor Blangiardi, who's getting very, very upset yesterday that people were daring to contradict him and not address the issues that need to be addressed. And so I think that, that's where we stand right now. It's really up to the people of Hawaii basically to take the appropriate measures. Coming into New Year's, I'm going to make a plea to people. Please do not get together in large groups. If you are getting together, if you've got access to rapid tests, use them beforehand, and use them right beforehand. Don't use them a day or so beforehand. Take them tomorrow, basically before you go to your New Year's gathering, if you insist that has to happen. Preferably, I would avoid those gatherings right now. It is not a safe situation out there with the level of Omicron that we have in the community. I think people need to take more responsibility for protecting themselves, because our public officials are obviously not taking that responsibility. And so that's basically my take on it at this point. On the CDC recommendations, problematic. I mean, I honestly don't see the science behind it. I know the papers they're referring to. They're talking about, for an example, of an outbreak at a Christmas party in Norway, where yes, the median time to symptoms was about 3 days, but there were people on the tail end down at 8 and 9 days who basically were still just developing symptoms then. So this 5-day thing without a test coming out of it really doesn't make much sense. Now, the UK has a 7-day quarantine period, but they require 2 rapid tests in succession basically to come out of that. So I think that, CDC again has subsumed political considerations about the fact that testing is so unavailable in the United States as an excuse for not requiring testing to come out of quarantine. And again, that's a huge mistake. That's a decision made on constraints rather than a decision made on what is the actually good public health advice. It's the same thing they do with masking in the early days, when they told people don't mask because we don't have enough PPE for the healthcare workers. And then, a month or so later, they basically said, start using cloth masks. This is the kind of decision making that we have seen from CDC throughout this pandemic. And frankly, to those of us who work in public health, it's extremely concerning. CDC is still off message as a public health agency.
Thanks, Dr. Altenberg. And just I just want to let you folks know, my brother tested positive for COVID. He's, vaccinated, has some mild symptoms, but his wife tested positive much later than 5 days after the exposure. So this just happened. So I know firsthand that 5 days is not sufficient. But what are your thoughts, Doc? You're muted. I think we cannot hear you for some reason.
All right. Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. So I was reading that the CDC admits that about 10% of transmission would happen after the 5 days. So basically what this policy does is give the reproduction number of Omicron a 10% boost, which is the last thing we need right now.
Yeah. I think that's the fear. As far as opening up, as far as allowing, we got a few major concerts, convention centers. Any concern about that?
Well, yeah, they're predictably dangerous situations. They're predictably going to increase transmission. So then when you know that a situation is going to cause people to get sick, when you have evidence for it, and you as a state agency or state leadership don't do anything, that would seem to put the responsibility on you for allowing a dangerous situation to go forward. So this idea of personal responsibility is completely contrary to just about the half of the Hawaii revised statutes, which are based on government regulation for the public benefit. And so, there are businesses that could probably benefit by getting rid of the fire capacity limits and let them pack in more people. But those fire capacity limits were instituted because every once in a while you have a fire, and if there are too many people, people die. So all of these regulations have been in force for decades to protect us from these rare, dangerous events. Now the Blaisdell concert that's going to happen tomorrow. This is not a rare event. It's entirely predictable that it's going to lead to a lot of transmission, just as the cluster at the Bishop Museum Festival was detected, and yet the mayor is not going to do anything to stop it. So that this is completely contrary to the entire body of public health law that and all the other regulations, health inspections for restaurants, et cetera, to allow something that's known to be dangerous to go forward is the height of personal irresponsibility.
Got it. The other point of contention in all of this, and we'll get to Dr. O'Carroll and Dr. Capono with this one, is the Safe Travels program. Charlie, before a lot of you came on, Charlie mentioned he works, obviously he's the security boss at the airports. and he mentioned a case where a passenger flew in, arrived positive. Kauai had nowhere to send them, and so we obviously have some positive infected visitors coming in. I know Dr. Capono and Dr. O'Carroll have been quite vocal about safe travels. In fact, Dr. Capono, I believe, even worked on the original task force. Not sure if Dr. O'Carroll did, but interested to hear your thoughts about the travel policies of our state. Should we start looking at changing it up? I know the lieutenant governor tonight on the news said that he was going to be proposing testing of passengers who's not boosted, which is a slight deviation from what we have. But any one of you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I can take it a little. Yeah. 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 I mean, to put it into context, the outbreak that happened at the nightclub here on Oahu used the same criteria, right? It was a 72-hour test, single test, or vaccinated, double vaccinated, and look at the outbreak that occurred there. So that's the same system that our people are using to hop on airplanes out here. Again, when the outbreak happened in South Africa, and the Netherlands was extremely worried about what may be coming in. And I don't know, and maybe somebody else on the panel, if they know of, if there's any other study where they actually PCR tested every single person on a plane. I don't know of any other one other than this, but 10% of the people ended up turning positive. Now, were they infectious? Were they on the tail end of the virus? We don't know that. But that's a significant amount of people. That's 60 out of 600, I believe is the specific number. And where you look, if you look at where Omicron is really raging in the United States, it's all of our transportation hubs. I mean, this virus gets places because it travels, and it travels with humans. So Atlanta, New York, LA, Phoenix, Las Vegas, here, right? So this is where the places that we're seeing a lot of increase. And what I've been saying for a long time as well is like travel again, I want to clarify, is travel is not the only cause of where we are at the moment, but it is a contributor, right? So there's responsibility and aloha and kokua of ourselves to everybody else, but also the Department of Health website, and I've mentioned this before on the show, sites that are high volume travel is the reason why our flu season is year long, and the reason why Hawaii has some of the highest, if not the highest, from 2017 to 2019, highest flu death rates in the country. So to think that travel is playing no part, I think is completely false. It is playing a part, and I think if we want to protect ourselves from one, future variants, and then two, this is not going to be the last pandemic, unfortunately. If you look in the last 20 years, we've had, MERS, SARS, swine flu, bird flu. There's going to be another pandemic. Hopefully we've learned a lot from this one, but I think Hawaii needs to learn a lot, because travel is important to Hawaii, and we need to learn how to do it safer, because it's obviously contributing. Because Hawaii was, I think, in the first 3 states that had Omicron, as mentioned earlier. And the more you travel, the more you're going to give any virus an opportunity to get to places. So I think, in summary, that definitely there should be more than one test, and the test should be the day of, ideally, if not just the day before, because when you've got what seems to be a shorter incubation period, meaning the time from when you are exposed to the time where you have symptoms, or even a latency period where you're infectious to anybody else, is really short now. Sometimes some people are saying 3 to 4 days instead of 5 to 6 with the original variant. So that single test that you took 3 days before you got on the plane could be completely outdated by the time you get on. And Dr. Altenberg did terrific work in the Lancet study that showed that a single test pre-Omicron only catches 20% of infections that eventually land in the destination locale. So with Omicron, I would venture to guess that it's even less.
Thank you. Dr. Capono, Chong-Hanssen, you did some work with the original Safe Travels program, is that correct?
Well, I joined in on the Kauai. We were called the Kauai COVID discussion group, and a lot of
Right.
that was work that was led mostly by Dr. Schwartz, who's faculty at University of Washington, and then Dr. John Alderetti, who's a virologist, and they both live on Kauai, at least for part of the year. So that's where I first got into the data about post or pre-travel and post-arrival testing and how you analyze, the percentage of cases that you would think you would keep out with that kind of travel protocol. I think to answer your question, to me, it's a no-brainer that safe travel should adapt to what the CDC is essentially adapting to, and that is that you should only be exempt from testing if you are vaccinated and have received your indicated booster, because those are the people that are more highly protected against Omicron and are less likely to transmit it. I don't agree with what the CDC did, but I do think that what motivated these new recommendations as far as quarantine was partially a similar thing to when they said, well, you don't need a mask if you're fully vaccinated. They're trying to encourage people to get boosters, that the people that are now boosted don't have to quarantine for those 5 days. So I think it's a no-brainer for Safe Travels to at least make that change. I think Dara's suggestion about having a test on the day of travel now is also a good suggestion. I completely agree that the state of Hawaii, if we are going to continue to be so invested in travel and tourism, then it would be smarter to be more invested in travel-related testing so that we can reduce the risk of these new variants or whatever the next infectious respiratory disease is. But it would have, the decision to make that policy change was, weeks ago, was early December, or I think it was early December, when we were starting to see what was happening in South Africa. But, it just doesn't look like there's much appetite for that at the state level. And of course, it didn't happen. And now here we are. Omicron arrived quickly. In the beginning, I believe it was linked to some people who went to an anime convention in New York, and then another, some sort of gathering related to a church or a church group at least. And so that quickly took off. So I certainly would like to see that. I know that they're probably not going to make that kind of change, but adapting Safe Travels to at least require a booster if it's indicated, I think that at least makes sense to me.
Anybody have any thoughts on the
Mel, can I jump in here?
Absolutely.
While we're on Safe Travels, I think the requirement needs to be not only the booster as an actual requirement for coming to the islands, but it also needs to include the test within 24 hours of flying. Because the thing you've got to remember about Omicron, even with the booster, you only have 70 to 75% protection against infection. Without the booster, if you got your vaccines 6 months or more ago, you probably have only 20% protection against infection. So we really need the combination of both the test and the booster. Now, why the booster? One of the biggest problems we're facing, and Catherine Cruz on HPR actually did a story on this a few days ago. We are starting to see tourists who are either getting infected while they are here or coming here infected, as somebody mentioned earlier. Those people, if they are not boosted, could end up being a burden on our healthcare system. And our healthcare system is already frayed around the edges and in trouble. With the rate at which these cases are increasing, even if we have the lowered severity that some people are estimating, which I do not believe that we actually have, I think the lowering of severity is being grossly overestimated by the media at this point, without much knowledge and without enough understanding, then we could end up finding spaces in our hospitals being taken up by tourists who get infected while they are here, or who come here infected already and then end up in the hospital. So I think that the boosting is necessary from that angle as well, basically to make sure that they have relatively mild illness should they contract it while they are here. I think that's an important point that we need to keep in mind. Remember, our most precious thing at this point is our healthcare system. It is a small, very limited healthcare system that does not have a great deal of capacity. We have 2,600 beds in the islands. Okay? We do not have that much room to handle a large surge of COVID here. And one of the things I want to stress when you talk about severity, a paper just came out actually yesterday from South Africa, which pointed out that the number of hospitalizations, even though it was down by 70, 80% in the South African context, which may or may not apply here, was still the same in the first 4 weeks of the Omicron surge as it was in the Delta surge, because there were 4 times as many infections. Okay, so it's important to remember, I think it was Lee who mentioned this earlier, the fact that so many more people get infected means even if the severity is lowered, and I don't necessarily buy that it will be here yet, then we will still end up with our hospital system getting overwhelmed.
Dr. Chong-Hanssen?
Sorry, I just wanted to. I remembered another thing that I think I meant to mention. I think, regardless of whether we improve safe travels, I think all of us in this panel have been bothered by what I would call misinformation about the efficacy of safe travels. That we at least need to be honest about what we expect out of the way that safe travels is structured. And I was recently working on an educational module for some charter schools on Kauai to help, improve education about COVID and vaccine hesitancy, all of that kind of stuff. And I saw again this idea that, all these cases are community spread, so travel is not the cause. And it just irks me. I think really the public needs to understand that the label community spread is often really more like an unknown label, that we did not find what the cause was. So we're going to call it community spread. And that's fine from a public health standpoint and for the community to understand they need to be cautious. But to then use reverse logic and say, therefore, it cannot be at all related to travel, that's where it's misinformation. Because if there's a travel related case and they spread it to 10 people and they spread it to 100 people and it goes on, those 500 people can, that were caught it from that one traveler, they don't all become travel related. They become community spread at some point. So I really wish the community, that we would be more honest to the public about that, about how efficacious it was. And yes, Dr. Lee Altenberg did a great job, with the Lancet study. That was another study that was just being really mischaracterized to the public. And it led to, I think, too much faith in the Safe Travels program. So I think we at least need to be honest about it. If we're going to keep protocols that aren't that safe, let people know, exactly what we expect. And then related to trying to prevent hospitalizations, I looked up the figures about the treatments that are available for statewide. So the allocation for January 2nd for sotrovimab, so that's the monoclonal antibody effective against COVID, is 120. So yeah, Paxlovid, which is the oral antiviral that is the most effective. I believe the numbers are 80 to 90% effective in preventing hospitalizations and death if used within the first 5 days. That's 240. Molnupiravir, which is the less effective one, it's estimated around 30% effective in preventing hospitalizations and deaths. That's more widely available at 1,080. I have other numbers if you want to know Regeneron and some of the more like inpatient hospital treatments. Regeneron's 252, and then sorry, I forgot, it's bamlanivimab, I believe, and that one is 230 doses. So just in the scheme of how many cases we have, those are very small amounts as far as being available to blunt the effect of this surge and prevent hospitalizations.
And that is why it's so important that we focus on preventing the virus. We talk about safe travels. We know safe travels is not safe. The CDC is investigating 88 cruise ships as we speak, maybe more now. And yet we have scheduled cruise ships, international cruise ships coming into our ports in January. Kind of interested to hear of your thoughts about that. Is that why? Should we be saying, whoa, time out, do not unload your ships on our dock at this point? We know you guys are vaccinated. We know you guys are whatever, tested, but we see the cases coming out of cruise ships. Do you guys think it's a wise idea to restart the cruise ship industry here in Hawaii at the start of an Omicron surge? Anyone?
Well, CDC says no.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Well,
but
CDC,
I think that's a little, it's interesting. You know, I hear through some of my colleagues in public health that, you know, as soon as the CDC makes a certain recommendation, like shorten quarantine, they're getting calls all over the place from people who are part of the, I think the travel industry about how they need to start changing their policy. But it's, you know, sometimes there are some travel recommendations and testing recommendations that the CDC makes, and it doesn't seem like those people are making those same calls. So I think that's a little bit hypocritical to put pressure in that way. But cruise ships are dangerous when it comes to COVID. I'm sort of dumbfounded that, you know, that they think it's a good idea, but it kind of goes along with everything else, like nightclubs and bars. It doesn't seem like people want to, the authorities really want to put the brakes on these things anymore, and are kind of willing to let it be left to individuals to make the decisions about what risks they want to take.
anyone else?
Well, I think, that brings up a point that I think is really critical. This is a public health problem, and the actions of individuals have consequences for the entire community. And I think that is something that our leaders seem to have forgotten. With their, personal responsibility thing. Well, if you don't want to take personal responsibility, not our job to do anything about it. You want to go to that nightclub and spread Omicron, be my guest. Not my job to stop that. I'm sorry. That's an abrogation of collective responsibility to protect the community. So I think that's, again, where I think I'm seeing a major failure on the part of our leaders, basically to step in and try to police those types of things where they need to be policed to protect the community. And I think that's an abysmal failure, because we know that these nightclubs are spreading this. We know that these concert events spread COVID. I mean, we've got the evidence. It's in the paper every day now. And yet we are still allowing these things to continue at this point. That makes no logical sense in any reasonable world.
Yeah, and to add on to that, to claim that soft lockdowns are the solution, I think just points to that how infectious these situations can be. How many airline attendants are out, how many flights are being canceled. That's because it's a highly infectious environment. All the data that said airplanes were safe pre-Delta, it hasn't been replicated. And then on the same side, nightclubs and restaurants closing because they don't have staff, or just regular stores that are indoors, is an indication not that soft lockdowns are working. It's that those environments are inherently fueling this surge. And so, I mean, if you've got to stay open, why doesn't the state at least think out of the box somehow and, give access to at least outside, right? Emergency access to sidewalks, to blocks, and if that's a much better solution than just, waving your hand of it and saying, as Dr. Brown said, personal responsibility, because that person may go and hang out with somebody who's being responsible, which then increases a chain, a dramatic fold. So it all doesn't make any public health sense when we hear reasoning like that.
There's one other elephant in the room, and what I want to do, docs, I want to try to get you guys feedback on the schools, the situation with the Department of Education, and then I know I asked you folks if you could tolerate us for 90 minutes. I do want to give our viewers opportunities to ask questions for our experts, but I kind of want to hear from each of you regarding the DOE's decision to go back to face-to-face learning. I find it kind of troubling that we would require a vaccination, and on Maui they're actually changing the definition to you got to have had a booster to be considered fully vaccinated. But right now it's you got to be vaccinated or take a test before going to a bar, a restaurant, or an event. But they're not going to put any type of safety precautions for our kids. I am dying to hear from your experts, whatever side you're on. Do you all believe that now is the right time to allow our kids to go back to school face to face without an option of online learning? Anyone? Dr. Altenberg, you look like you're raging to speak.
Well, I was going to say, when in the fall, when the classes restarted in the midst of the Delta wave, I thought for sure they're just going to rip, it's just going to rip through the schools, and it doesn't appear to have. And so I was wrong in my intuition. And I'd be very interested to hear from the other panelists how it was that the schools managed to staunch the spread of Delta. But Omicron is so much more transmissible that I don't see how the schools would be able to manage it. But I was wrong before. So I'd be interested to hear what the other panelists say.
Got it? Anyone else?
I mean, for me, given the current situation and the rate at which cases are going up, I think at a minimum we ought to be delaying the start of schools by a couple of weeks and make sure that we basically have ventilation in place in the schools and in a validated way, make sure that, masking requirements are going to be there. I would actually prefer to see that the schools provide high quality masks to the students. And I think that the state should also be considering doing that for every citizen. And I think we need to make sure that distancing requirements are enforced in the schools if we reopen them. And when we reopen them, then I think we've got to be very, very careful about monitoring very closely. If we could get the test kits, I would even recommend a, so-called test to stay sort of system where basically I would actually do it even before coming to school. Basically, if I had the testing ability, I would basically test every student before they came in with a rapid test on a regular basis, just to make sure that we were trying to keep COVID out of the schools. I do see schools as inherently risky, especially given the much higher transmissibility of Omicron relative to Delta. And so I do think we need to be very, very careful here. And I'm not seeing any caution on the part of our leaders, our state agencies, and that's what I'm extremely uncomfortable with here. We've got to stop this transmission. I mean, it's out of control at this point, and we're doing nothing to stop it.
Anyone else?
Well, it's very Hawaii, I think, to not put the brakes on certain parts of the economy, but then take kids out of schools. But it's nothing that we should be proud of, I don't think. I guess the way I look at it is we should be prioritizing having children in schools. And so, nightclubs should definitely go before we are about it like that, that these recreational activities that don't have to do with the well-being of our children should be regulated before we, start impacting school again. I think if I had it my way, I would love for all students to have the option to do distance learning. I would like to see it that, if they wanted to do in-person learning, that they would need to get vaccinated so we could increase vaccination rates in the pediatric population. But I think it's not going to happen. We've been involved somewhat with the testing in the schools, and it's been a challenge. I've learned a lot about the disconnect with the DOE and the DOH, and it's challenging. So I guess this is another one of those things where, I don't think I would advocate for it publicly now to say shut down schools, but I certainly understand all the risks that are happening. And, I agree with Dr. Brown and Dr. Altenberg. But I'm somewhat surprised, like Dr. Altenberg, that we haven't run into major issues thus far when we thought we would have. So it makes it difficult to make the argument that they should shut down now. And there was not much interest in doing that before. Sorry, I don't have a great answer for it. I think it's a risky situation, but the best we can do is wait and watch, because I don't think that change is going to happen. And I would love to increase the testing capacity at the schools, but I can tell you that hasn't been worked out very well, at least not on Kauai. The way that the contract has worked is, it's like a lot of things, was kind of Oahu centric, and I think that that's made it a challenge on Kauai, and I imagine for a lot of the other neighbor islands, that's been a challenge as well.
You know what's frustrating is we've had 2 years. We've had 2 years to study ventilation. We've had 2 years to study social distancing. We've had 2 years to get our schools in a position, in a state where we can get our kids. I agree, kids belong in school. They do better in school. But with Omicron, I mean, I don't know. I just think that we fell short. And to come out with a policy statement as they did yesterday, no, we're moving forward. And the part that disappoints me the most is what I've been hearing from parents is that they have been threatened with child welfare service action if they keep their kids out of school. I would never send my kid to school right now, not in the middle of an Omicron crisis, especially if they haven't been vaccinated. So I feel for these parents who they're stuck. They want their kids to go to school, but they also don't want their kids to get sick. So I again, it's a failure, as Dr. Brown keeps talking about. It's a massive failure because we had the time, we had the money to go ahead and redo our classrooms so we could get adequate ventilation, all of that. So it's frustrating. It is definitely very, very frustrating. And at the end of the day, who suffers? We have made a lot of concessions and compromises, as you said, for nightclubs and bars and restaurants and concerts and all of these marathons and all of these things. We haven't done much for our kids and the parents. And I think that's the frustration.
Well, I think, Mel,
Can I add something here?
Yeah, I just want to add something too.
Go ahead.
Mel, I think the problem we're facing here is that we've got far too reactive a response to this pandemic. We are not even trying to get ahead of this thing. We are constantly racing behind it, waiting for the next major problem to occur, and only then thinking about how we're going to respond to it. And even then, we consider for weeks how we're going to respond to the problem, even as it is happening. So, for example, the rapid growth we're seeing right now, all we're hearing is we're evaluating, we're thinking about, we're considering. Well, no, this is not the time to consider. This is the time to act and basically pull the circuit breaker on this transmission. And we're not seeing that. So again, it's a reactive response. It's not proactive. It's not trying to get ahead of the epidemic. And that's the reason it is failing so badly. And like you say, we've had the opportunity. We've had some of the lowest rates in the country up until this point. And we have failed to use that opportunity basically to get ahead of this virus and basically to make our islands much, much safer than what they are right now. And that's the real shame of this whole.
Dr. Lee, I'll get to you, but I just want to say, and Mayor Blangiardi yesterday tossed his hands up and he said, straight up, we will never get in front of this virus. He gave up. He basically quit on the people yesterday. Dr. Lee?
Well, I think there's been this pattern of wishful thinking that the vaccine is just going to solve the problem, and with that wishful thinking, a shirking of responsibility for what if it doesn't, for considering alternative scenarios. And so, once the vaccine was here, everybody was talking about just reopening up and going back to normal, and then one variant after another arrived. So, and I think it's been that wishful thinking on the part of the leadership that's resulted in us not getting the masks, getting the tests, getting the ventilation squared away. So, there's a cultural pattern of looking for high-tech magic bullets. All right, this seems to be an American habit, that the high-tech magic bullet is going to solve everything. And we don't need to worry about the low-tech things like putting on a paper mask, or just putting fans and filters in a room. So the problem is it's like saying, I thought the whole purpose of airbags was so that you didn't have to wear seatbelts anymore. No, that's not the way it works. You use everything you've got to try to lower risks of mortality and morbidity, and we're not taking a total war frame of mind towards this pandemic. We're just trying to finesse it as the state leadership goes, and then every one after another of these plans to just finesse the pandemic are overturned by the new variants. So at some point, what we're seeing here, we can think about this pandemic as a massive stress test on our society and our culture, and it's revealing things that we may not been aware of about the culture. So Mayor Blangiardi's emphasis on personal responsibility, well, he's in denial about the way that public goods and emergent and population level phenomena work, where it's one person's choice is not the end of their causation. And this denial of these aspects of reality is what's getting us into trouble. And I think we need to do some soul searching about the character of thinking in our society, and our ways of dealing with unpleasant realities. If we're ever going to solve the problems of global warming, we are sure going to have to do something more than just people taking personal responsibility.
That's a great analogy, Doc. Great analogy. We do have some questions coming in. Charlie, you had any questions up on your? I know he's. You can tell Charlie's, like I said last night, ready to strike something. He's gonna strike something. One of the questions: are we nearing a point where we may hit an artificial ceiling for reported cases due to testing capacity limits? This is from George White. In other words, we may not hit the actual high numbers simply because we aren't testing enough. That is a huge concern of mine as well. Anyone want to take a shot at that as far as testing? We know our cases are a product of testing, and if we're not testing, everyone taking home tests that's not recorded by the Department of Health. What are your estimates as far as real case counts with the unidentified cases so far? What do you think? We're over 7,000, 8,000? Anyone?
I'll take a quick stab at that one. Well, pre-Omicron, the estimates of real, not case prevalence, but true prevalence, how many people aren't getting a test, how many people don't believe in the virus, how many people are asymptomatic. I believe HIPAM, the local modeling group that Dr. Altenberg's a part of, used a factor of 7. So to multiply, the case count by 7. So 3,400 times 7 over, 21,000, right? That's what that would be. However, I haven't seen any adequate data, and maybe the panel might know better than I, what percent of people are asymptomatic. Also, there are a lot of people who are just going, I'm hearing, and this is again just an anecdote, but people who are trying to get a test and can't. And so I think it's safe to say anywhere from 3 times, maybe the panel differs, but at least 3 times what the case count is what the true count would be on a daily basis at minimum.
All right.
Well, I think, he's...
Lee,
yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Lee?
You can add some back of the envelope calculations to that. So on Oahu, today's numbers, there was 2,680 cases, positive cases. So if a person is then infectious for 5 days, and if the actual number of infections is 3 times that, all right, then you get to about 5% of the population is currently infectious on Oahu. All right, 1 out of 20 people. So this gives you, a ballpark of just how we're just swimming in Omicron. And if you have, so if it's 1 in 20 people and you have a group of 20 people, there's a good chance that somebody in that group is infectious. And if you have 40, then something like 80% chance that somebody in that group is infectious. And so that's why large gathering sizes are really dangerous.
Dr. Brown?
Well, I think, I was just going to say that CDC does do some seroprevalence testing in blood donors. And there, what they were finding previously was estimates of about twice what the number of reported cases was. However, given the capacity constraints that we're facing right now in terms of testing and other issues, certainly, estimates of probably 3 to 4 times are probably perfectly reasonable right now. We also do not have a solid understanding of exactly what proportion are asymptomatic at this point in time. And it's a little difficult to say because a lot of it, because we have such a high vaccination rate, a lot of the people who do contract Omicron will probably have asymptomatic infections. So I think that, it's definitely much, much higher than the counts that we're actually seeing, probably by a factor of maybe 3 to 4. And so it is something I think to be very, very concerned about. I mean, like Lee was saying, COVID is out there in the community. That's the bottom line. And everybody needs to be acting like every group of people that they go into has somebody with Omicron and behave accordingly. That is, mask up, use high quality masks, keep your distance, avoid the crowded places if you possibly can. I think, that's just common sense. If you haven't been boosted, go get boosted. And I think that, while boosting is critical, it is equally important that we stress that people need to be wearing good quality masks whenever they're in public settings. I think that has not been emphasized enough. And I still see a lot of people with bandanas, with, pulling their t-shirt up over their nose, people wearing their mask down under their nose or literally hanging off one ear. And I think that we have lost the caution that we had before. And this is exactly the wrong time to be doing that. And we really need to educate the public about that, because I think the public is not seeing this, and all they're hearing is this lower severity message. And they're not understanding, I think, what the potential risks of this are that will evolve over the next month, month and a half, which is when we're going to start to see our hospitals really fill up. Although the numbers we're putting out every day are already concerning. We're already at 140 people in the hospital. So I think, we're still very early stages, and that's just going to get worse over the next month.
Yeah, the minimization of COVID in general, more so with Omicron than ever before. We just had a question pop up. I'm not sure why it didn't pop up on my monitor, but it popped up on my phone. It's from Scotty. And he's asking, by now we should have a fatality percentage of Omicron. What is the percentage chance of dying? I think what I want to hear from you folks, and maybe from Kapono and Dara, I don't know how we convince people that COVID or Omicron is not whether you live or die. It's not one or the other. It's what happens to a COVID patient, what happens to someone that contracts COVID, whether it's alpha, beta, gamma, delta, zebra, whatever it is. My daughter still has memory problems. She has fatigue problems. She's been recovered. I shouldn't say recovered. She's gotten over the major symptoms. We're seeing kidney damage, heart damage. We're seeing long-term effects. So if maybe the guys, Dr. O'Carroll and Dr. Capono, can chime in, are you seeing that? I mean, I think, shouldn't that be part of the equation rather than just what's the percentage of death? Shouldn't we be talking about what's the percentage of damage to human beings because of this virus? That's the discussion I think we got to have, not how many people died. I mean, that's, how many people, I'm not even going to get into that debate, but are we seeing long-term effects from COVID? That's the question.
Well, I think we certainly should pay attention to the deaths too. I mean, they're
Absolutely.
significant, and especially when you look at the difference between deaths in one island and then another island that had completely different policies. I think that's a good comparison. I'm always sort of looking at Aotearoa, New Zealand. You make a good point about the long haulers and those possible effects. And I think the other part is the downstream effects on the healthcare system when it gets overloaded with COVID patients. And we were seeing that in Delta when people are delaying the other types of care that they would need, elective surgeries. But a lot of those are really more like not urgent surgeries, but then they sometimes become urgent, or cancers go undiagnosed because screening procedures are not done or biopsies are not done and treatment cannot be initiated in time. And that relates to the CDC quarantine recommendations too, about how much it's taxed the healthcare system. I do think that that's part of what led to these shortened quarantines, was that in some places in the continental United States, they're having a hard time staffing healthcare facilities because of the quarantines, and there's so much Omicron going around. So, is it better to be short on ICU nurses or have to use nurses that aren't very familiar with ICU care? Or is it better to have an experienced ICU nurse that, has a shortened quarantine and is going to be wearing a mask? That, becomes a debate. But part two, there are secondary effects that come down the line for the strain that it puts on the healthcare system, and then our inability to address the other problems that are routinely occurring. And I know I've mentioned this before, hospitals aren't set up, when it's, kind of like peacetime, or, when we're not in a pandemic, it's not like hospitals are sitting there mostly empty. They're mostly full. That's how they're set up to be. So it's not like we usually keep a huge capacity to be dealing with pandemic issues on top of that. So when the hospitals are full with COVID cases, all those other things that usually fill up the hospitals tend to be pushed to the wayside. So that's the other thing to really be considering.
Dr. O'Carroll?
Yeah, I would just echo some of those same points, in that it boggles my mind that our solution is to bring in 700 FEMA nurses, and are we going to get all 700, and how soon? I don't think in enough time. How many of them are going to go out sick before they can even get here? But the only other time I've worked with FEMA nurses is on disaster deployment after a Category 5 hurricane. Like that's the kind of solutions that we're hopping to, and it seems so nonchalant. Oh, we'll just get 700 FEMA nurses. No, I mean that's just increasing the capacity for sick, when I think there should be more mitigation and bringing back the term that I think was very popular in the beginning of the pandemic, is flatten the curve, because that's where the real danger of Omicron is compared to any other variant. That curve can really skyrocket, and we're seeing it across the globe. With regards to long COVID, yeah, we don't know the rates of long COVID with Omicron. We really don't. We're flying blind. It hasn't been around long enough, we hope. And again, hope is not a strategy, as George White likes to say, but we hope that it's not prevalent. But we don't know. Brain fog, as you mentioned, Mel, lack of taste and smell, heart inflammation, myocarditis, permanent lung damage, fatigue, joint problems. I mean, there's a pretty long list. Not everyone's going to get it, but it's something to worry about. And hospitalizations and death, while extremely important, they're a very low bar for public health, right? Like there should be a more wholesome, altruistic look and at what our health means, and it's not just how many people are getting hospitalized, because especially with children, right? Because every child that gets hospitalized it's a scary time for them if they don't understand what's happening to them and why. And we're seeing some prelim evidence that the hospitalization rate, while is still not as high as, as somebody with 65 and comorbidities and unvaccinated, is a little bit higher with Omicron. Maybe this is just one report. We're going to need to see a lot more studies, but it says it's about 20% more hospitalization risk in children. And that really, and we'll need more time to figure out why, but one hypothesis is that we do know that this virus affects the airways more than the lungs. So that's why we're seeing less pneumonia. But children have a lot smaller airways, so they can't tolerate as much inflammation in them as adults can. So when you start with a very small airway, the same amount of inflammation is going to affect them a lot more. So there's just a lot of unknowns that I think we're just playing with fire with at the moment.
All right. I don't want to be accused of avoiding answering the questions. But let me say this, Scotty. Omicron is new. We know about the typical trends of cases. Hospitalizations typically follow 14 days to 21 days, and the deaths follow 2 to 3 weeks after that. It's too new, and I think you know this, Scotty, so I'm not sure why you're asking the question. It's too new to determine a death rate for Omicron. I think what my point was that when we're trying to fight this pandemic that's affecting the world, that's affecting pediatric hospital beds and kids across the country, that we should be on the front end trying to stop it and not wait for it to happen and then call in for nurses or call in for assistance, put up tents and morgues, refrigerated containers outside. The point I was trying to make was that when we're talking about the importance of stopping the virus, is yes, it's to prevent death, but it's also to prevent people from getting sick. And that was my whole point. So unless one of you can provide, I have tried to find this answer. It's not available. I think it's too soon. But Dr. Brown,
let me address this. I think fundamentally the reason we don't know the fatality of Omicron is that it is very tightly bound up with the immune status of the population, which means the proportion of the population which is vaccinated, what level of vaccination they have, the portion of the population which has been previously infected with one of the other variants of COVID, the age structure of the population. Now, what we have so far is in fact, there's only one study that has actually attempted to deal with the immune status of the population that I am aware of. And that basically was a study out of Imperial College. And they actually did separate out the unvaccinated from the vaccinated. And with that, they estimated that the severity of Omicron was 20 to 30% lower than the severity of Delta. But it's important to remember Delta was already twice as severe as earlier variants of COVID, such as Alpha and the wild type. So for the unvaccinated, it is probably about 3/4 as dangerous as Delta was. Okay, but 3/4, when you look at the number of the rapid expansion of infections, becomes a real problem. Now, we don't have good enough data yet at this point to estimate the fatality in those populations, for example, single vaxxed, double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, etc. Imperial College is working on that. Their report that they came out with about a week ago, using the hospitalization and death data from the UK, has tried to make initial estimates of this, but the number of hospitalizations and death with Omicron so far, when that report was issued, was too low to give us much confidence in a lot of the numbers by immune status. But I would anticipate in the next 2 or 3 weeks, especially given that London hospitalizations are starting to shoot through the roof right now, they will have much better data, and we will be able to give estimates, at least in the English population, of what the impact of immune status and hopefully age, they haven't done that yet, will be on what happens. Now, why that's important? Because age also is correlated with the amount of waning of your immunity against infection. Okay, the older you are, the more your immunity wanes over time. And that means that there will likely be more breakthrough infections among the older population than there were among younger populations. And all of these other studies that people referred to that showed 80% reduction, 70% reduction, and so on, to a great extent were based on younger populations, because it is the young population that gets infected earliest in this epidemic. So we do not really yet have solid data on what's going to happen in the older populations as a function of their vaccine status and their age. And that's what we need to know to really assess more accurately what we're likely to see in terms of overall fatality associated with Omicron. And that's a very complex situation. And so it's very difficult for the press to convey that to people. So they settle on this, oh, it's much, much milder narrative. And we really don't know at the population level what the ultimate impact of Omicron is going to be in terms of fatalities. That will take time to tease out.
Yeah, and I know the lieutenant governor a couple of days ago mentioned, he relied on the South African data, and it's apples and oranges really, because we don't know the breakdown of the South African data. We don't know the different variables from the cases there compared to here. So I thought it was kind of a stretch to use that as a reference point when we don't know. And the reality is we just don't know, and that's if you don't know. Let's prevent it. Let's not try to find out by going and living through it and getting people killed. I think that's the frustration many of us have, is we are in the wait and see mode, and it's creating a lot of problems. So we shall see. It is 8:26, guys. I know I told you guys 90 minutes. We did have a couple of questions. I think you guys covered everything. Sorry, I'm reading the comments. But I did want to give each of you an opportunity to give us some closing thoughts. One of the things that I'm thinking about, guys, because I see some comments about where do we go from here? What do we do from here? You guys have all been. Sorry, guys. There's some private chat going on right now, and it's I love your humor, guys. These doctors are awesome. But you folks have been doing everything you can. And every one of us have been trying to do what we can. And the question is, where do we go from here? Last night, I was thinking out loud. We belong to this clubhouse, club room that is an audio deal that Dana Moore is going to be putting the link up shortly. Please join the clubhouse. It's free. It's an app you download and you come on, and there's all experts from all over the world. Docs, you guys would enjoy this. And we can talk to people from all over the world about COVID. But I thought about getting a group of people like yourselves to kind of help us get a data sheet just on the topics just what we talked about tonight, or we got to mobilize. I think Dr. Brown, you brought it up. There's the Clubhouse app, guys. That link, please click on it, especially all of you docs, and join us at the post show tonight. No wine, no crackers, but a lot of good discussion. But you said it earlier that our legislative branch, our mayors, our councils have sat back on the sidelines, our legislature, and we got to somehow motivate them to move. We gotta get them moving. And the only way I think they will move is if we get some sort of literature to them with about 100,000 signatures, so that they understand if they continue to sit on the sideline, they ain't going to get reelected. And I'm thinking out loud here, guys. If you guys are willing to do something like that, just something a nice little cheat sheet that we can submit as sort of a petition, and we'll get the signatures. We got to get them to start holding the administration accountable for the decisions or non-decisions that they are making. That's just one of my thoughts, and I've just thrown it out there. But I do want to hear closing thoughts from each of you before we sign off tonight. I know you guys, it's late and you guys are busy, but who wants to go first? Free speech. Say whatever you want.
Well, I'll share my Mana'o. I mean, the overall thing for me is that I love Hawaii. I love our islands. I love our people. I love the culture. We have unique environment here. We have unique people here. We have a unique culture here that is different than the rest of the United States. Overall, I think this is another time when we kind of see the disappointment in our state leaders just following CDC policy without thinking of the unique things that we have in Hawaii, like our geography that could keep us safer. And I think we should be looking at leaders that are willing to think outside the box from that standpoint, and do things differently than other states. And I think it kind of goes along with what's been happening with the Red Hill or Kapu Kaki. You know, it's not worth it for our state to accept, you know, outdated policies, outdated facilities that put our environment at risk. In the same way, it's not wise for us to accept outdated policies when it comes to public health and travel that put our people at risk. And I think we've learned over time, you know, which of our leaders are willing to think differently and willing to put our residents' lives first. And we're the voters. So, you know, it's been disappointing to me. I've learned a lot, you know, but I think that there are politicians that think most of the population of Hawaii are uninformed voters and are easily misled or swayed to vote in ways that might not be beneficial to them. So we need to be thinking about that. And if we ever have opportunities during elections and be informed voters and show that we're able to, I guess, exert our voting will. So that's my big message. And right now, you know, I agree with you guys. You know, we've really been left to try to figure out this pandemic on our own as a people. And with New Year's Eve, I hate to feel like the party pooper again, but, you know, the best thing that we can do is try to limit gatherings and not have this explode on us even further, because it doesn't look like there are going to be further measures taken from our leadership anytime soon. So once again, you know, aloha each other, malama kekahi kekahi, and I think we just all can acknowledge how unique our place is and how unique our culture is and how we love our neighbors, take care of each other.
Well, Doc, when you identify these elected officials that are willing to stand up for the people, let me know so I can reach out to them. I still haven't found them. You know, you brought up Red Hill. I talked about this on last night's show. Red Hill, they didn't have the Chambers of Commerce, the visitor industry, Hawaii Tourism Authority, all of those people on their backs about not to stop Red Hill. You know, Red Hill was a very easy political move. I was making fun of it. I was talking to a friend and said, you know, Red Hill, I saw representatives and senators pop up on TV that I had never heard of before. But it was a very safe angle to take politically because there was no opposition to making it right. With COVID, the political ramifications of standing up to industry, travel industry, and corporate America is not safe. And our politicians, every single one of them, I have yet to see one person stand up, have chosen to sit on the sidelines and ride it out until the next election. And when that election comes up, they're going to come to each and every one of you and ask you for their vote and tell you how much they did for you during the pandemic. And that's why we gotta identify those that are willing, get them on board, and support them as they do what needs to be done to make us safe. Sorry for that little rant. All right, next up.
Yeah, let me say, when the patient is bleeding out, it's time for triage. If our leaders won't lead, then the people have to lead. I do not expect significant actions out of our leaders in the next week or two. Nothing that's going to stop the spread that we are currently seeing. Therefore, it is up to the people to stop this spread. That means we need to basically avoid those New Year's gatherings. If we are going to them, then everybody in that gathering needs to be tested immediately beforehand, and masking needs to be in place, and distancing, and preferably outdoors if at all possible. I think we need to minimize that. I think somebody in the comments said it. You know, let's delay New Year's so that we can have another year in the future. I think that Our kapuna are at the highest risk right now, and we need to keep that in mind. We do not know what the fatality rate of this is going to be for those of us who are older, and it's a matter of time until we get that information. So in the meantime, we have to assume that it's going to be an important factor, and we need to take the steps necessary to stop this. So please, if you're not boosted, get boosted. If you're not wearing a high quality mask, get a high quality mask and start wearing it everywhere. If you're going into crowded places, stay there for the minimum possible time that you can and get out as quickly as you can. Those are the measures that basically will help to keep us safe. Those are the measures that will help to reduce community transmission. And it's our responsibility right now, because our leaders have made it clear that they will not take the measures necessary to slow that transmission. And that's what I'll leave it at.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Altenberg.
Well, I think that this pandemic reveals the domination of the ideology of money making. All right, so that's what's dominating the desire of the leaders not to do anything that would interfere with money making during this holiday season, and the failure to take into account the public benefit. So, this has been a long 40-year development in American politics, to become blind to public benefit and to think that everything that everyone needs can be achieved through private money making. But this is a denial of reality, and the pandemic throws it in our face that there are some phenomena that are not just the result and solvable by private money making. And we have to take into account the public good. So me working at a public university, it was created for the public benefit. And in the past 4 years, the defunding of the university is because people have started to think of it as just a private benefit. And I think as a society, we have to recover the idea and just the awareness of public benefit. And that's the function of government, to make sure that we don't lose those things. And so right now, all of us on Oahu are trapped in the mayor's ideology of private money making as the solution. And the people that are going to get sick as a result of that, this is something that the mayor is in denial of. And I think we have to recover just the awareness of these public goods as a part of the reality of living in a civilization. And this is a conversation that has to go on beyond this show and beyond the next election into the future. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Dr. O'Carroll.
Oh man, tough
Tough
to follow all those.
People are going to remember this show based on what you say in your closing comments, sir.
Well, thanks for the pressure. I just have to echo everything that all the panelists have said thus far. You couldn't really encapsulate the heart more than Kapono, and the knowledge more than Dr. Brown, and the esteemed, just pure class of leads. So I'm just going to say, have a happy new year. Have it with your close family. Don't gather in large groups. Stay outdoors if you can. Wear large masks, because each and every individual action is a component of the larger health of our whole community. So be well, happy new year, and be safe.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you all, docs. Appreciate you guys sharing the time with us tonight. To our villagers out there, happy new year. I think you heard enough warnings about being safe. Spend time with family, but be safe. Our mission here on the village, the Mel and Charlie show, is to inform and educate, but it's also to make sure we all stay alive and free from illness. And that's the goal. There is absolutely no other motive for this show than to keep everybody safe and try to spread the word. We have an excellent panel tonight. Charlie had to jump off. He's got some issues at the airport, but I speak on behalf of him. We wish you all a very, very happy happy New Year. Most of all, be safe. You remember now, once this pandemic is over, and Charlie's not here to shy away, we are going to have a concert on Kauai, and you all are going to be invited. And we want to meet all of you face to face. And I'm talking about our villagers. We got to grow this village, people. We got to share this out and get as many people involved, because this is my prediction. My prediction is that we'll be over 5,000 cases in the next day or two. But once the New Year's is over, once the concerts are over, once all these big events that had already been approved that the governor and the mayors had no balls to cancel, once those are done and their obligations have been met, the hammer is going to come down. But it's going to be too late, because Omicron will have had its foothold in our beautiful state. But you watch, mark my word, they're already starting to talk and give us the clues that they're going to, as Blangiardi says, drop the hammer. But they're not going to do it now, because too many big name concerts and events have already been approved. And they don't have the nuts to say it's not going to happen. So with that, that's my closing thoughts. Love you guys. Stay safe. God bless. Docs, stay safe. Hug your families for us and tell them we appreciate them sharing you with us tonight. Take care. God bless. We won't be on tomorrow night. Enjoy your New Year's Eve. We'll see you guys on Monday night. Aloha.
Thank you very much.